Oh, started streaming straight away. That wasn't my intention. Okay. All right. Looks like we've already started though. So, and I wanted to I was just about to map something out for the Quasar chat app, and I thought I might just stop where I am and show you guys how I take something that I've been mapping out and then turn it into basically some concepts that'll turn into real life components. So I've got a bit of a system. My system is anything that is blue is for a module. So I organize my things by modules. You'd have to see a lot of my other stuff to know what I mean by that. But basically, modules are usually like models. So, for example, in this case, for a chat message is a type. It's something that's in my database. It's a model within my system. And if I was creating something for a chat message, then I would cover it in blue. And one of the other concepts I have is views, which I do in purple. So views basically usually just hold a whole bunch of modules and then other base level components as well. All right, so most of this stuff will be in blue. What we're doing is we're making it so that you can open a dialog to create to manage your playgrounds or manage your REPLs. In fact, maybe we should change the naming here. Playground. And the idea is you create a playground, for example, a playground for using Vue with Quasar. And then you say, what is the name of the playground? And then you can create releases for that playground. Yeah, so I'm just creating a UI for that. Basically, it's going to be like a sandbox chat app. So let's come over here and start naming some of these things now. This is where I was starting. I can start anywhere at this point because I've already finished mapping it out. And I'll quickly just show you what's actually doing here. How do I get my messages up? So I'm just going to quickly... No, sure, it doesn't matter. And it kind of does. I can't see my messages. That's right. I can open YouTube in a bit. All right, so basically, we've got a dialog that shows up and shows all of your playgrounds. And this is an example of one of those playgrounds. You can take a look at releases, which will show you that dialog. I've got my arrows mixed up. And you can also edit one of your playgrounds. So let's come in here and call this create playground. I'm going to copy this because the create is going to look very similar to the edit form. Just make it smaller, that's fine. I'm not worried about things being perfect in this case. And we can call this update playground. And yeah, we should be okay to change both of those things. And in this case, you won't have to sort of REPL, so I'm going to delete that. And I think that'll do. Okay, so now when you click on the edit button, it shows that dialog. Boom. All right, how am I going to name these components? This is going to be a form. So what I do is I use the same color for the naming of it as well. This means I can very quickly generate all the files that I need when I'm ready to start building. And this would be, we're not using the word REPL there. This is for a playground version, because once you've created your playground, you then create versions for that playground so that you can just keep releasing versions. And if you have a version that has changed things a little bit, it's not going to destroy prior chat messages that are using those playgrounds, because otherwise, everything would fall out of sync and things would just not work if you go back in history. All right, so we would then call this, we change that to release though. Sorry, I'm playing a little bit of catch up here. So create, we don't even need the word create for this form because it'll work for create and update. So we'll call this playground release form. That would be my naming convention there. And let's go ahead and make this blue, and I'll make that bold just so they stand out a little bit. Okay, that's the first one done. Hopefully we're getting a bit of a roll now. We want a dialog for that. So let's create a playground release dialog. I am exploring ways that I can streamline the relationship between the dialog and the form. So that's one component, but I want to make sure I do it right. I often prefer to write just a little bit more code and add the abstraction when I have a really good understanding of what that abstraction will look like before I do it. Because you get stuck with abstractions, but you don't get stuck as easily with when you just end up, writing more code. So if I have a problem that I can abstract and I abstract it wrong, that creates a huge problem into the future that just gets worse and worse and worse. But if I decide not to create the abstraction yet and think about it a little bit more and, let all the nooks and crannies of the problem show up, then that means that when I eventually do add the abstraction, it's easy to then implement that with all of my code. At least that's what I've found. It's been my experience. All right, playground release dialog, but this is specifically for creating one. So create playground release dialog. And we'll call this manage. So I always use the word manage when you can create, update, or delete things. So manage playground releases dialog. That's what I'll name this one. And I won't talk about it now, but I have naming conventions that I always follow for all of these kind of things. So this could never be named anything else because of our naming conventions. And so people in our team can very easily find the components that they need because we all know how we name things. Often you'll see my naming and you might think that it's a little bit long. The reason that it's so long is because of that, because you can just go Control P in the application and search for the component that you're looking for, and you'll be able to find it. We can very, very predictably find the component that we need. So in this case, the word manage means that you can create, update, or delete. You might not be able to do all of those things, but it's a place where you can, alter and create new things. Playground is the name of the module, or sorry, playground releases is the name of the module or model in this case. And then dialog is the name of the Quasar component. So this is a very, very intentional naming convention. Okay. So the next thing we have is this list. There we go. And this is going to have the word manage as well, because in the future we'll probably have create, update, delete, etc. on those list items. So we'll call this manage playground releases list. Again, might seem like a bit of a mouthful. Everyone on my team would know exactly how to find that component within the file tree and also just searching for the file. And I believe it's a lot faster to search things. In fact, I don't just believe it, I'm pretty confident that it's true, that it's faster to find things than it is to try and, by searching, than it is to try and look for them through a file tree. It means you can think of the thing that you want and find it rather than having to click around all the time. Okay, so that's playground releases. This is for the actual playground itself. So this will be playground form without the word release. And we're also going to have an update playground dialog. All right, so let's add those things in. That one goes there. I mean, it's kind of obvious, but sometimes I like to do this extra work just because it's fun. I like looking at it when it's done. This thing is kind of cool. Now, this is a manage playground card. I'm not going to, and I won't create a component for the releases and for the edit button. I never go that far because if I never have any nesting in that component, then I don't think it's worth abstracting it to its own component anyway. Maybe you would do that, but if you did do it, you'd create what I call a single context component. So if I created a component for this, it would sit in the same place as where I built this component. So all of these blue things here, these components, they represent folders. So this would be a folder called Manage Playground Releases Dialog. Inside that folder would be a file called Manage Playground Releases Dialog. All right, so the folder and the file name the same thing. And the cool thing about that is with this card, for example, if I ever wanted to abstract that component, I would abstract it within the folder for this component. All right, so this component gets its own folder. I know that anyway. So any other abstractions I need can just sit within there. And that's why I call them single context components. If I created a component for this releases button, which I wouldn't, by the way, but if I did, if it got complex, it would only be relevant in this one context. I would never use that button anywhere else. Therefore, I would put it within this folder. So that's what I mean by single context components. Okay. So let's call this Manage Playground Card. This is a card for managing the playground. All right, that one was easy. Now we've actually got a view here, which is kind of exciting. And not the dialogue itself, but the content in here is a view. Not going to go into it now, but essentially my concept of a view is it is allowed to have knowledge of the backend. So all of these cards here, none of them are allowed to make API requests. That's a very strict rule that I have when I code. Lower level components lower in the component tree, do not make backend requests, and they do not have knowledge of global state. This makes it really easy to swap things out as you need to, and it makes it really easy to just keep your code separated. And it keeps your components really dumb as well. So for example, this form here, you can vmodel it so that you can change the version, ESM URL, JSON schema. You can change all of that within that form, but it won't actually do the request to make the thing. And it doesn't have any knowledge of global state. So it doesn't know how to insert the thing into the store, none of that. All of that logic gets pushed up to this purple one here, the view. And this view will be called, surprise, surprise, well, no surprise, which is the point, Manage Playgrounds, plural, view. All right, so this is a place where we manage all of our playgrounds. And it's the one that can do all the API requests. Now, one of the cool things about that is if you put all of the responsibility of making backend requests and dealing with the store high in your component tree. By the way, almost nobody does this. I think this is one of the best things you can do when you're coding with Vue. If you put those concepts of working with the store and the backend higher in the component tree, which in this case is the Vue, it means that you can very easily react to changes. So you can, for example, say, oh, when this is created, so when you've gone ahead and created a playground, automatically open the releases dialog. All of that orchestration of how all of these elements work sits in one place. So if you've ever ended up with that problem where you're low in a component tree, something happens, but then somewhere higher in the component tree, you have to react to that, you'll know that this is really hard and you end up making gross coupled code. So you might want to say, for example, when this is created, open a dialog. And then if you didn't do it this way, you'd have to say on create, emit event that it was created, and then you'd emit another event that says it was created, and you emit another one here saying it was created, and then this one gets that event and then does something based on that. And all right, I'm talking too much now, but this is one of my favorite concepts, the idea that you have a view that does have knowledge of your global state and making backend requests, but then your other components do not. They're dumber. Okay, let's move on here. Have I finished this one? Yeah, playground phone up there. Yep, and I finished that one too. Oi. Oh, my dogs are just growling at each other for some reason. What are you up to, Panda? Okay, so we'll call this create playground dialog. Create playground dialog, and we'll also have a create playground form. No, we're just playground form is enough. And the other thing is we're going to have the REPL for the version form as well, or the release form, which is this one here. So essentially, this playground release form is also going to be inserted under here. So when you create a playground, you create a release for that playground at the same time. There we go. And I'll remember what that means. Sweet. We'll do one more square around here. And then we're done. Then I'll take a break and I'll actually build it because I'm guessing people will actually want to see, you know, the building of the thing as well. Or I'll at least generate all the components so you can all see what that looks like. All right, that one. And that one. And there we go. Doing the feature itself should be a lot easier now that I've got all of this mapped out. And since I'm using Quasar, I just don't really bother with design. I kind of do that as I go. I'm not a designer, and I find it just easier to design through my code once I've built the layout. So there we go. That's that. And I'm going to stop and then come back, probably make a coffee, do some more streaming in a second, and show you how I would then build all of this out.